Greetings, dear listeners. Before we get started, a reminder to head on over to wisdomofcrowds.live and consider becoming a paying subscriber if you're not one yet. You'll get access to, among other things, the full conversation, as well as other subscriber-only benefits. And don't forget to give us a like and review on your favorite podcast app. With all that out of the way, on to the show. Did not assault anyone. I'm not going to Google it. I'm just going to say that. Wait, has there been a precedent about getting sued for slander for saying
on a podcast?
No. I'm sure people have gotten sued for slander on a podcast, but saying something like Demir definitely does not beat his wife, that sort of stuff.
I think that's how you get around it.
Yeah. Okay, so we're safe.
Yeah.
All right.
Well,
I'll check.
No lawyers listen to this.
I'll check online, and I'll just cut this part out if it's actually slanderous.
Yeah. To anyone who's listening, please note that these are allegations and only hinted at best.
Let's not dig deeper. We might be completely misremembering this, and it might be someone else. I really have no idea.
It's definitely someone else.
Anyway, so you're saying I should put colorful background rather. Okay, there you go. There. That
well,
solves the problem.
I mean, I think the blackness of the previous background maybe matched the blackness of your soul after returning from Ukraine. Welcome back.
Thank you. Really?
Yeah.
Do you feel like it was the blackness of my soul from the Ukraine trip?
Well, I don't know. I mean, you tell me. You know, I read your post, and I guess got a couple of text messages from you while you were over there.
Yeah.
And you talked a lot about feeling excited but guilty about being excited, almost about sort of the danger, right? Like there is the thrill of being in war, which is obviously not thrilling anymore for Ukrainians, maybe, but the sort of
That's part
war
of the guilt,
journalist
right?
thrill of the chase.
That's part of the guilt. Part of the guilt is that it's such a terrible cliche, right? Also. And part of the guilt is like, what the hell's wrong with me? Certainly. But, it's interesting. I since the post pubs, at least two people have, I don't know, on Substack have restacked it and said that they've had similar sort of experiences and feelings about, of just being in some sort of really intense situation. John Stokes, who's the founder of Ars Technica and just like a all-around cool and interesting dude, said that he had a similar, related experience working at, doing disaster relief in New Orleans, I think he said.
Sure.
And just the intensity of that experience, said it took him quite some time to reintegrate back in normal life. And he said, I think perceptively, which wasn't really on my mind at all, but that he felt like after that experience, he got a small, tiniest little fragment of a taste of what it must be like for soldiers coming home, or just also it's the intensity of the situation.
Going from extreme. Yeah.
And it's just all of that. And then you come back and you're like, oh, what is this? And that wasn't on my mind. Really what's on my mind was it really was that conversation with my colleague at the beginning when she was just saying, just keep your head about you. And, it's sort of is a trope, I think, for journalists who go. There are sometimes people among them, and I think often there are photographers who go and they're the ones that are, in pursuit of the story will take really reckless risks.
Yeah.
And the, especially for a photographer or videographer, you do have to sort of, be near exploding things to get a photo or a video of an exploding thing. But is that a story? Is it worth it? Are you really doing anything? Or are you really gratifying yourself?
Remember when we went and saw Civil War?
Yeah.
And the main character.
That's right.
War photographer.
Good point. Yeah, no, that's right. And it is that, and it was that was on my mind as I left, because my colleague Chloe. You might remember Chloe. I don't know if she was there when you were at the
Yeah, I
Post,
don't know.
but I don't know. Chloe's been at it for a while. Her husband's a photographer as well, and so I really did. I don't know what, like, took it to heart what she was saying. So I was dismayed. I was legitimately dismayed at myself at the end when I really felt like leaving Ukraine a certain kind of like adrenaline letdown. And it really was like a kind of sense of self-loathing because it was really mixed with with a newfound appreciation of just how awful people's lives are there, So it felt like extra particularly sorted to have left Ukraine and felt like, oh man,
I'm
I wish I
missing.
was there getting bombed in Kyiv, which is just like a really messed up sort of sentiment, no?
Yeah, well, I mean, yes, I guess, but it's also a really understandable one. I mean, the I think a big difference for you and for like these photographers and this sort of person is that like you can leave.
Right.
Like it's thrilling and then you're like, and I'm going to go back to DC where like the worst thing that happens is like the National Guard, which is bad, but like, not
Yeah, that was pretty bad. I came back to
yeah.
that and you know,
But I
right.
mean like that wasn't like happening in your house.
Sure,
Um
sure.
and I mean I think this is why people people love an adrenaline rush, in the absence of war or problems, people are like, well, I'm going to jump out of an airplane. Like I did that. Or like, I'm going to go climb like some horrible mountain and, suffer because like I need the adrenaline. Like my life is nice and normal.
Yeah.
Um,
But I've
it's,
never found myself to do that. And I guess maybe that was part of the surprise. I've never jumped out of an airplane. I've never wanted to. I don't like roller coasters. I freaking hate those things. You know what I mean?
you throw yourself down ski slopes. I
Yeah,
mean,
skiing, sure. Yeah, yeah.
but yeah, but I don't know. I think there's also something about modern life that feels a little bit enervating for people. Again, it's just like living in comfort, the sort of like end of history, like nothing is really going on. In some sense, maybe it feels a little bit thrilling to like go back into it. It's understandable. It's not like I'm not I don't know, I'm not saying that this is a good feeling that you should be proud of, but I find it very understandable. It's also interesting that John Stokes pointed out that being in New Orleans after Katrina, I guess, felt
Yeah.
like that, which the idea that like a major US city was turned into basically like a horrifying war zone in our literally in our backyard is like kind of alarming to think about as a
Yeah.
side
I mean, his
note.
point was though, it's just like the intensity of the work, right? Like that
Yeah.
it's the and in a way his point's a little different from the experience in Ukraine because like the crazy thing there is that you're kind of helpless. You're not in control. You're not solving problems such as it is. Uh, again, I was in a security bubble most of the time. It wasn't like for me in any way um, particularly dangerous. It's for other people. It's for people like living, not inside the well fortified center of Kyiv and truly suffering with this stuff. And I got a quick taste of it, because we went out of Kyiv for a second, of what it feels like to just sort of be helpless, in front of these bombs and just sort of like integrate that into your life, which is, I don't know, just sort of horrifying. But it's what John seems to have been describing. Those it is more military, right? Is that sort
Yeah.
of in the sense of tons of problems to solve in real time. Uh, stakes pretty high, probably not quite as high as like being in a war zone, doing like humanitarian relief in a disaster zone, but still like lives are at stake and you're solving, and it's like teamwork, and that intensity, was that this intensity was there's something different about it. And also, there's something, I guess what it is, like throwing yourself out of an airplane or like climbing a mountain or something like that. Um, there's at least sort of like a positive narrative arc of no, you know what I mean? Like overcoming fear or pushing yourself, like climbing a mountain, certainly a dangerous, like Mount Everest, you're conquering your own fears. You're also incredibly physically fit, and like, doing that. Maybe you don't have to be so physically fit. You can be a fat ass and jump out of an airplane, but you're scared to jump off that ledge, right? And
Yeah.
and so you're conquering something.
But
And I
you
guess
were
that was
just
the
driving around with security.
well,
And
it's not just with security. I mean, it's just like, what did I do? I didn't do anything. And then I want to go back there to be part of it. It really was like, if you take a step back, there's like nothing noble about it. And that's why like I felt like a particular disgust about the whole thing. Maybe understandable. I mean, I'm glad you understand it. That means I guess I managed to convey something of it. But like yeah, it didn't feel noble at all. And that's why I was just like, I didn't really know what to do with the feeling at the end, because yeah, it's nothing to be proud of, I guess, is what I'm saying.
I mean,
Um,
a phrase comes to mind, um, like war porn.
yeah,
Um,
war tourism.
yeah, war tourism. Um,
It's another funny anecdote. Before I went on the trip, I don't know, a bunch of our mutual friends have been the journalists, like, John Hudson's been, Ani's been like dozens of times. And it's so, you sort of hear stories and you contextualize it. And there's all the reporting, and the reporting is accurate and truthful. But it's different. It's like different to be on the ground than like just like reading all the stories. You just like get a different sense. And part of the sense you might get if you're reading this is, the cities are bombarded all the time and it is oppressive, but it's also not Dresden. It's not even like London during the Blitz. You know what I mean?
yeah.
It's a very different sort of feeling. And so I was kind of ready for that, but still like talking to Washington Post security, they're telling you like, you got to be checking in on WhatsApp with this. They make you install an app that tracks you everywhere, for insurance reasons and all the rest of it. So
That's
then I
so
was
grim
it's wild.
for
And then so
insurance.
I was, as the time was approaching with all of these sort of details, I was like, what have I gotten myself into? And the editor-in-chief of the Kyiv Independent was in D.C., and I had coffee with her, and sort of like, yeah, I'll be in Ukraine. Are you there? She's not going to be there. She's like, oh, you should meet my deputy and whatever. And I said, yeah, like, so, a former colleague at the Post went like 2 years ago, and Post security made him carry a bulletproof vest over there. Now, to be fair, I think he was ferrying it there so the bureau on the ground would have an extra vest. Like he didn't have to bring it back. It wasn't necessarily
He
for
was
him.
like wearing it. Yeah.
It was to bring it. But I was just like, like, and they're being very like thorough with me on this trip. I was like, what should I expect? And she basically laughed. She said, like, here's the thing you have to understand. For a lot of Europeans, it's not very hard to get to Kyiv. It's like basically an overnight train ride from Warsaw. There are no planes. Airspace has been shut down since 2022, so you can drive over the border or you can take a train. It's cheap. I don't know what it's like $30 to get from Warsaw to Kyiv by train, overnight train. I think you can even get it less than that if you don't get like a sleeper car. And she's like, people come, and like Kyiv actually has, a nightlife scene. And so she's like, you have like a bunch of kids coming and like partying in Kyiv, and then you'll see them on the street like in the morning with their phones up in their heads. They're like, oh my God, I'm here in the war zone in Kyiv and whatever. But it's just like, it's sort of war tourism, exactly that kind of war tourism. And she said, like, similarly, you can tell like sometimes, like a new journalist comes in and he's wearing like a flak jacket in downtown. He's got a camera pointed at him. And she's like, it's not that at all. So yeah, I mean, it is all of that. It is this thing, and it doesn't represent the reality of what's on the ground. But
Yeah.
again, I don't know. I guess that's what I was trying to do in the piece, is sort of like get a sense of more what the reality is, and sort of to focus more on what is truly horrible about like living in Ukraine right now, while at the same time not letting myself get off the hook by like with my voyeurism and like that sort of like sense
This is
of
Demir reporting from Ukraine.
yeah, exactly, like I don't know. I'm not a freaking journalist. You know what I mean? Like
Um,
I'm just a scribbler, and it's like I don't know. It's like all sorts of um, I don't know. It's not imposter syndrome. It's just straight up imposterism. You know, like there's real journalists on the ground. My colleagues are on the news side, like on the like actually writing the stories day in day out. I was just parachuting in. So yeah, I guess it was sort of like I don't know, working through some of that stuff on top of the kind of war porn, war tourism aspect of it, which I was also felt like I was engaging in.
yeah, I think the piece touched on a lot of interesting and, I don't know, sort of familiar feelings that I think the Ukraine, the Kyiv context is a very specific one and very timely, obvious. But um, I don't know. I think a lot of those feelings could be like extrapolated to sort of other spaces or other times in which, I don't know, safe, privileged Americans or Westerners like go somewhere and are like, ooh, it's so different from my like normal, safe life. Like I'm intrigued. And I will also say that, I mean, you may not call yourself a journalist, but you're at least in the journalistic profession. And I think journalists by nature are a little bit voyeuristic. I mean, you're going to like find someone's story because you want to know the story and like tell other people about it. The whole thing is watching other people and seeing other places and then talking about it to someone else. But I mean, it also makes me think of, I don't know, journalists and writers, right? Who like go like, oh, now I'm in Africa. Like, ooh, Africa. Like I'm in the developing world. Like, oh, I'm going to, like South America, like this wild place. Like maybe there's not a war happening, but like, oh, I have to like squat to use the toilet and it's so exciting and different.
You
And
know
like,
that horrible like Brit thing about journalists, the British journalists like landing in a. Do you know that one?
no, please share.
Oh God, it's something like what's the uh I forget how the delivery. I remember the punchline, but it's like the a Brit journalist lands and in some sort of war zone. It's like first words out of his mouth is who here speaks English and has been raped, and that's
Oh,
and
but
that's journalism
kind
for you.
of.
But that's kind of journalism, right?
Yeah.
And
Like where's the bombed building so I can like
where's the
take a
bomb
photo of
building? Who
it?
can speak to me in English? But I think that the punchline, the grim punchline is who's been raped. But the real ugly truth is who speaks
Who
English,
speaks English? Yeah.
because you're coming in with no context, and just like really parachuting in. At least I speak like a pretty nasty broken Russian. I've been following the Ukraine stuff, and I've been there twice before. So not like completely out of my depth, but even so, like I went, first thing I did was contacted our actual journalists on the ground who are, actually there. And I was just like, I'm going to tell you every conversation I have here. Maybe it helps you, but I just want to talk to you guys. So I have, some guardrails. So I'm not making an ass out of myself when I write about stuff because, it's one
Yeah.
thing to live in a place. It's another thing to like, again, just parachute in and be like, hey, let me,
I'm here for a week.
I'm here
Now
for a
I know
week.
everything about Ukraine,
Now I'm an expert. Exactly.
which so many Ukraine experts over the past couple of years. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I can sympathize. And also I think one of the things that you've got across well in your piece is the sort of you just said that it's not being bombed like London and the Blitz or, Dresden or something. And I haven't been there. Obviously, I was like not in London for the Blitz, but there's something also, I think the word drudgery comes to mind about like a sporadic bombing. Like it's not even always sort of intense. It's just like always droning in the background of your life. Like you describe almost everyone as being tired. And that is the feeling. I think that came across really well in your piece. And that actually made a lot of sense to me. Um, just the
Yeah,
feeling that it's been going on and like in a way it's not even as acute as you'd think. It just like keeps happening. And I think this is what Russia wants in a sense, just everyone being like tired and kind of willing to give up at some point, even though maybe that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean that's exactly it. I mean, it's like they're worn down, and it's a form of being terrorized, right? Like, I mean,
yeah,
it really was. Again, these sorts of things happened on the trip. I didn't like write them up in a particular like the those three ladies I met on the train and their like stories of fatigue. It was just sort of it was nuts that I don't know, was like the literally the opening of the trip. And then like after that, I just like saw it everywhere. Every time you talk to people, it's that like deep fatigue. And of course that's part of the plan. And the part of the plan is also to destroy the electricity grid and like make life difficult. And I mean, I didn't even like note it in the piece, but the other thing um was really jumped out at me. And it's little things that you notice and you can't confirm because they're not really being like talked about. But for example, after the strike I mentioned in there in passing, that like in western Ukraine, that one missile killed like 37 people in this high rise, but also just like they really devastated some power centers, like some power generation, either that or like transformers on these sorts of things, like really crippled the grid. It felt after that for example, like my cell phone would drop from like high speed into like edge, if you remember that, like that,
Hmm.
like the really slow crappy network. And it would happen a lot more in downtown Kiev after that. And it, like it's no one you can ask like, oh, is that happening? But it's like, well, that's fucked up. I wonder if that's related to the fact that they're. And so it's like a bunch of little things of like just you can feel the oppressiveness of the fact that like these attacks, they're killing people, but also are just like really like running the country down
Just
and
making life annoying. Yeah,
making life
and
annoying and
irritating.
harder and worse and shittier, just shittier. And you know the 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 tough part, the really tough part is uh and it's so hard to like get to the bottom of because as a journalist, I think like a lot of Ukrainians are loath to talk about it. There is some polling, there is not some polling, there's polling that suggests that there is a rift in the society, that, like a good chunk of the population is ready for the war to end and
Hmm.
is willing to like actually, uh, I don't know if it's like do anything for it. And it's hard. It all depends on how the question is asked. But like it's, it's the war is having a real effect on people. Um, and, it wasn't in this piece, sort of alluded to it in a piece I'll put in the show notes that I did publish at the Washington Post while there during all of the run up. I was there when the Trump 28-point peace plan for Ukraine dropped. Um, and like a couple of days before that, I mean, I was talking to politicians, like actually people, um, you know, within and around Zelensky, who were saying basically, the situation's really bad, like really,
Mm.
really bad on the ground. And it's not just that our people are getting terrorized. It's not just that it's going to be a very cold winter and the electricity is going to be out with blackouts and we have to figure out how to heat people and stuff like that. I mean, there's solutions for a lot of this. They have been preparing, like it's not going to be doesn't seem like it's going to be like a complete catastrophe, but it's going to be a very hard winter by the look of things. Um, but more like the thing that really shocked me is they were saying, yeah, we need to end this war like soon because all this talk of yeah, like we're the story was we're losing basically, and it's we doesn't mean that if we lose this town of Pokrovsk, which is now still being hard fought between the Russians and Ukrainians, that if that falls, for example, the line is going to break and the Russians will be able to drive for Kiev and collapse the government. That's not it at all. But they were saying, like we're talking about territories and about like making concessions to the Russians. If we fight for another 2 years, it may take them a year or two to like win these territories that we're talking about right now. Um, and it'll cost them enormous amounts of people. Like the Russians are really just like
Throwing
throwing
people.
throwing people into the meat grinder. Um, but these officials said like, but it'll cost us a lot of people too. It'll cost us 2 years of further destruction of our cities. We're already having trouble bringing people into the army. Like the recruitment numbers are tough. There's 7 million, I think, Ukrainians abroad. That will be 2 more years of them not coming home, of building lives abroad. And basically 2 years that we lose of like rebuilding the country with all the money, the reconstruction money that's been pledged and things like that.
Yeah.
And so it's really grim. And the kind of stuff that I was hearing there on the ground was like, it's not that anyone was thrilled with the Witkoff plan, but the kind of reporting that like immediately hit. I was reading, that was like being published back in Washington, was this idea that like this is just so beyond the pale, this plan, like so
Disgusting,
disrespectful and, like complete betrayal and all the rest of it. No, make no mistake, it's bad for Ukraine. Like it's a bad and ugly plan. But it's not like people that I was talking to there, the way they would talk about it was, we need to be talking about least bad outcomes at this point, not like good and just outcomes at this point, because that's what the situation's like.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting also to think about like how it's read from the outside versus from the inside. And I think even your feeling of like parachuting in and it being exciting, but then like you're able to leave and that's why it's still exciting for you.
Yeah.
Has much to say about probably how Americans and allies are thinking about this. Like Ukrainians on the ground, like Ukrainians in Kyiv can't eat Pride for dinner. Like Pride is not going to keep them warm at night when they don't have electricity. Like they will feel those outcomes in the long run if this war continues. But, Americans who are like, I donated to Ukraine and I'm like hanging a Ukrainian flag outside of my DC row house, like have lots of latitude to be like, no, we have to keep fighting. We have to keep going. And by we, I mean me from afar in my warm house supporting you. And I don't really know how you're feeling, but it feels good for me to say that you have to keep going.
So, yeah, go on.
No, I think that's a really, I don't know, that sort of voyeurism and sort of like participation from afar is something that feels really good to, I think, Americans. And again, people who like don't have that kind of severe threat or that severe experience in their lives, like it helps them feel like they're doing something in the same way. And I was thinking about it, the sort of, they're not soldiers of fortune, right? They were just like random Americans who at the beginning of this conflict were like, I'm going to Ukraine, I'm suiting up and like shipping myself over. And then like several of them promptly shipped themselves back after, 2 weeks there. It's
some
easy
were rejected too. That was my favorite
some were
part.
just
like
turned around.
Ukrainians were like, I'm sorry, fatso, get back. You don't get a
Americans,
gun. Go home. Yeah.
I mean, our own army is having that problem.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really easy to sort of make those suggestions from a distance. And then I also think that, and this is a fault of, I think, our media environment too in this moment, it's really easy to, like a conflict happens, it starts, there's lots of coverage, supportive, but then like as it keeps going on, like Americans in particular don't really have mental stamina. Like I'm thinking about money that was pledged or sort of like resources that were pledged. And it's not even necessarily that like if it continues to go on, it will be 2 years until Ukrainians can use that. I can also imagine it being if it goes on for 2 more years, Americans will like get bored and move on to the next crisis. And the money that they pledged or the money that they gave is going to be gone. It's going to go somewhere else. Like the world's attention will not sustain behind Ukraine for, I think, as long as however much longer, this conflict happens. And I think that's an indictment of us and our sort of like stupid short-sightedness and inability to pay attention to things that matter. But I also think that's a fact at this point.
I mean,
part of the reason why Trump was able to even sort of like pass that plan and like have it talked about is that honestly, the American focus is no longer on Ukraine in the same way.
I mean, the money's mostly gone and the U.S. is not providing anymore. That was Trump's big innovation. He's like not providing weapons, not providing money. He's like selling weapons through the Europeans. And, that was the sort of way, the interesting thing is that the Europeans now are out of money and they're trying to confiscate these funds that they've frozen, these Russian assets, and figure out a way to unlock that. That's a whole big drama that's happening right now. But yeah, you're right. I mean, like again, that's another big constraint. I think a lot of people in Ukraine know it, that like, it's that clock is ticking. I mean, one can also fairly say it is very costly. Now, like, there's also a good argument to be made that like it's worth the cost because Russia you know, if it doesn't get stopped here, I don't know,
Do it
will
again somewhere
impact
else.
elsewhere and all the rest. I mean, I can argue both sides of that.
For Europe,
Uh,
certainly. For us,
right. And, but again, that's a rabbit hole. I just wanted
yeah.
you know, the part I wanted to just sort of like, not like push back, but just maybe qualify a little bit was, you know, the bit about Americans with their Ukrainian flags and comfort supporting, but not really understanding. There's a flip side to this that like bugged me just as much, if not more, which was the line that you'd hear from Trump people, from a lot of the sort of like restraint folks. I mean, you really heard it from Trump a lot, was, I want to stop this awful war. Too many people are dying. And I always like didn't like that argument, because that the question of how many people the Ukrainians wanted to sacrifice to fight this war is a question for Ukrainians, and at the same time, like it's a question for Americans, how much money we want to put into this and how much, you know, support and all the rest of that. That's an American question, because, you know, it's our money, it's our wealth, and it's our priorities, you know, globally, and how we want to do that. But the idea that like, you know, we need to save Ukrainian lives
From
here always.
themselves.
From
Oh,
themselves,
yeah.
but no, just more than that. It's just like, I think it also misunderstands the fact, or obfuscates the really important fact, is that the Russians invaded. The Russians are still invading. They are taking land, taking cities, destroying them, and killing people. If people are left over and on the other side, it's like wild repressions. I mean, like, you know, and kidnapping children. You've heard all of these stories. There's testimony. We're recording today on Wednesday. There was testimony on the Hill about some of, you know, these kidnapped children. I didn't follow the stuff. I just saw some headlines. Seem to be ending up in like North Korean camps or something, like crazy shit. It's again like it. And again, you know, until it's verified, the rest of it, but like, I wouldn't put it past it, like anyone in this sort of stuff, that like the
Yeah.
kind of evil shit that's happening here. So again, then saying, I never much cared for the Trump line of, we have to stop this awful war, and when it's Ukrainians like fighting to save their villages and
Their
towns and their
children. Yeah.
families and children. And so that kind of false humanitarianism, let's end this awful war, always struck me as wrong. I'm not also a fan of the kind of boosterism, which is like, you know, we must fight to the last Ukrainian, basically, which I do think that's another part. But I always felt very strongly that this is an existential war for Ukraine, and they really do have a say if they want to keep fighting it, you know, like it's
Yeah.
our say whether we want to keep supporting it, but if they want to keep fighting it, you know,
It's their
that's on them.
country. Yeah.
And so that was why this trip also was kind of revolutionary for me. It was a real eye opener to hear some of the pessimism from Ukrainians themselves, and that for me was a big deal. Now, I knew it existed before. It's just a different thing to just sort of hear it, and to hear it at the highest sort of levels. Now, I don't want to also give this impression here that like there's a unanimity in Ukraine about like throwing in the towel right now. Again, you know, it's hard when you are a foreigner parachuting into this. They know you work for a paper. They know you're a journalist. They know you're going to amplify voices. And again, there's polls. The country is split. A chunk of the country wants to keep fighting. The veterans really want to keep fighting. We were taken to this really fascinating, you know, basically in a garage in Kyiv, which there are many like this, veterans who are, you know, were engineers in previous lives, just MacGyvering drones, you know, like it really is incredible. Like it's this industry of drone manufacture. And this guy, you know, really impressive, like, but like felt like a foot taller than me. He didn't show us, but he like did like knock on his leg. I think he has like a semi-prosthetic leg. Walks fine. I mean, again, miracles of modern like prosthetic stuff, but like a veteran who, you know, had like perhaps his legs blown off, is building these drones. And the way he talked about it was basically like, I will not rest until these rapists and murderers are driven from every inch of Ukraine. And I don't think that's a minority viewpoint either. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's hard. It's complicated. I think like you're right to point out that there's a kind of voyeurism and simplicity to it, but like it cuts both ways in a lot of ways, and it's complex, because again, we do have a say, because it's money and priorities, and it can't be an unlimited commitment and rebalancing responsibilities with Europe. How do you share that? Is Trump doing it the smartest way? No, obviously not. But is there a grain of truth to what he's doing? Yes, absolutely. It's complex. But I just wanted to complicate that bit a little bit because I think it's complex in various vectors there.
Yeah, in two directions.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like it was informative.
Yeah. I don't know, like the thing, like your essay last week about like vibe shifts around Trump and foreign policy, specifically this week, it feels like, you wrote more broadly about it. I was struck on the Ukraine stuff that the 28 points reception when it landed here, seemed like such blowback against Trump, and maybe would fit into that narrative. Yeah. But I don't think I think it was sort of misplaced there because while it was ham-fisted in a lot of ways, it wasn't as ridiculous as I think a lot of people made it out to be. Whereas like the Venezuela stuff is freaking bonkers, and I don't even know what to make of that. And that Washington Post story a couple of days ago about the double tap strikes,
war crimes,
and the war crime stuff. I don't know what do you make of the vibe shift and like on all of this? Like where are you at now a week later after writing that essay for us?
Yeah, well, I mean, when it comes to foreign policy, I think you're probably right about the 28-point plan not necessarily being ridiculous. I think where we're seeing the vibe shift, though, is that where previously even like Republicans would have been leaping all over themselves to be like, no, it's amazing. It's brilliant. Trump does it again. Give him a Nobel Peace Prize for this. Ham-fisted, whatever it is, like whether they thought it was good or bad. The fact that Republicans and others in, that space are actually criticizing Trump, or actually like the fact that there is blowback for something that Trump is doing when, a couple of months ago he could do no wrong, is interesting to me. I mean, people were defending the most ridiculous crap just like, 2 or 3 months ago, like the tariffs, like, oh, it's Liberation Day. Come on. Like, no, even the people who were saying that didn't believe it, but they were still willing to say it. And now, like, nobody is willing to say that, or not nobody. Obviously, there is still like hardcore Trump contingent, but it does seem to be peeling away at the edges. And then when I think about, Pete Hegseth also, so it's Wednesday. We also finally got the news that, Signalgate had been investigated and, apparently Pete Hegseth was in the wrong for sharing classified information over Signal with Jeffrey Goldberg. Surprise. Right. But I think that people are now, again, not really defending this, not really defending Hegseth, like actually beginning to say out loud, oh, this person is incompetent and crazy. And before, there was like some respect given just because he was a Trump appointee, right? Like, Daddy Trump said that Hegseth is good, so we're all going to pretend that Hegseth is fine. We're all going to vote to confirm him, even though we have obvious reservations or reasons to have reservations. Now those people who are like
philandering, like sex abuser.
He's a philandering alcoholic sex abuser who also commits war crimes. Like that. Right. That is a problem. We don't love that.
I think there's a couple of things though, right? Like there's the fear of Trump is ebbing clearly. Like I think you mentioned, right? Like there's a lame duckishness sort of seeping in.
Early duck with a sprained ankle at this point.
Right.
But yeah, we're seeing it.
We're seeing it like,
and we have election evidence too, which is important.
The Tennessee thing that just happened, like, way like what
a swing from a 22 points for Trump
to 7 or something, right?
Yeah, I think it was 9, 7 or I think it was 9. But yeah, his influence is waning, and people who are coming up are seeing it.
The fear is gone, right? Um, but like, I mean, like the Ukraine stuff, honestly, I, I didn't find it like it was that much of a change. Like I felt like the sort of usual suspects are pushing back against this. What's weird is, and I think this is where like it really is a vibe shift, right? Because you had enough Republicans doing cover over the absurdity, the patent absurdity of blowing up these ships. Um, it's like I don't know, the weird logic here is like you declare, are we at war or are we not at war, with these like now declared terror organizations, narco terrorists, whatever. It's all very messy. We don't even have, I think, as of time of recording, the Office of Legal Counsel memo justifying this, so we don't know what the justifications are.
Yeah.
I mean, I find it even more fascinating that like we need an office that serves under the president, that this
To say
provides
it's
the
okay.
justifications for the actions of the president. It's been absurd to me for a very long time, but like with everything else with Trump.
There's the note in the Post piece that like no lawyers were present at the meeting, no lawyers from the Pentagon. And it's like, well, okay, what were they going to say?
Well, I mean, that's
But
the thing,
yeah.
but that is part of the absurdity, right? Like actually in these kill chains, there's always a lawyer. A fucking lawyer at the table signing off on this stuff. And I mean, it's like so much with Trump, like he by his grotesqueness and his like deep and profound psychopathy, he blows open a lot of the really bizarre and kind of really grim and chilling aspects of our imperial apparatus. Obama was blowing people up as well, and also with OLC blessing and the rest of it. I mean, it was
But
more
he was
legal.
delicate about it.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? Like that's exactly it. But it's still there's something so slapdash and so grotesque about this, and like the justifications for this are so opaque. Yet people were carrying water for it until the Washington Post breaks this story that of the double tap strikes. I've been talking to friends, colleagues at the Post. By the time this drops, I think there'll be like a column or two, and I'll put it in the show notes about this. But it's the fact is that like if we were in fact at war, and if everyone believed we were at war, like for example, imagine I don't know, it's a battleship, and there are I don't know Japanese frigates approaching it in World War II, and you fire at it, and then it like starts sinking. Of course, we'd keep firing on it, and it wouldn't be a problem because it's war, and we understand it's war.
Right.
And so if these were actually combatants and like equivalent to like a threat to the United States on the level of declaring war, and if everyone believed it, as they said like 2 weeks ago that they did, what the Washington Post revealed wouldn't be a problem.
Wouldn't, yeah.
I mean, it would still technically legally be a problem, but like, as I was saying, like all this legal stuff is kind of, to me, it's always kind of been nonsense. But like so what you see that like, from what I see, by the fact that this report, which I think is a bombshell report from the Post, and I'm not taking anything away from our news side. I think they did a fantastic job with this, but it's fascinating that this triggered anxiety among Republicans. The first thing that did it, whereas like they were all on board with the nonsense, the absolute nonsense of this illegal freaking bombing of a bunch of like poor Colombian peasants on boats. You know what I mean?
Yeah. 1 second. Sorry, I love the environment as much as the next person. But this like energy saving thing where the lights turn off is really, and I can't make it stop even when I have something going on. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think one of the reasons why it didn't work, and why I think it maybe exposes some of the problems that like the post-Trump or late Trump Republican Party is going to face, is that Pete Hegseth is no Donald Trump.
None of them
like,
are.
Donald Trump is a unique figure,
Yeah.
And his total ridiculousness and larger than lifeness means that he can just like say random, stupid stuff that doesn't even make sense. And people will still nod along and be like, yeah, that's amazing. Oh, it's totally true. I totally believe you. And, I experienced this. He came, when in 2016, he came for an interview with the editorial board of the Washington Post.
Oh, wow.
Um, and that I, was able to sit in on. And it was bizarre because he really does have like a charisma, like a star power and magnetism where he said insane things. And it was only like very late in the game and like after he left that we were all like, wait, what? Like, what just happened? And like, he can do that. But then you see Pete Hegseth like dancing around being like, Department of War, the fog of war, war fighters. And it's like, you're a ridiculous man. Like,
Yeah.
you're ridiculous and I don't respect you. And
But
I
as you
think
said, he had the
Republicans,
protection of the king, so people didn't dare, and now they dare.
yeah. And I mean, like, once the king is gone, like, that is all going to fall apart.
Oh,
And
for
even
sure.
like the king is sort of falling off even just a little. And it's very easy to finger like a clearly incompetent and ridiculous person like Pete Hegseth um, as incompetent and ridiculous. Like he can't defend himself. And, if Republicans are frustrated with the status quo and want to be seen as like doing something, then sure, like go after him. Um, yeah, I also think that that's maybe tied to the idea that there's a sense of frustration um, in the country at large. And I think it's being felt by Republicans in Congress that the Trump administration, the Trump regime isn't really like doing things for people or doing the things for people that they said they would do. And what it's doing instead is like getting embroiled in kind of like year late efforts that they think will have an impact and that nobody really cares about anymore. I mean, the focus on narco terrorism, for example, Trump ran on how fentanyl is like destroying the country and there are all these drugs, et cetera, et cetera. Actually, like deaths from fentanyl have fallen. Um, America still has that concern, but is like, I think less interested in that right now and more interested in like the economy, in other problems. And the fact that Pete Hegseth is making America look bad and being publicly insane and war crimesy over this issue that's not even the main issue anymore, I think is probably frustrating to Republicans too.
I keep struggling to figure out, and again, maybe this little sentence will be overtaken by events by the time the podcast publishes. But I can't wrap my head around whether they're actually trying to overthrow Maduro or whether this is all just a bunch of fireworks on the drug war stuff, which they convinced themselves was an important issue that polls well and was somehow
Yeah.
going to save them. I've heard so many theories about like what the hell's actually going on. Like my favorite unsubstantiated one was that like Trump really, 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 for again like theatrical reasons, wanted to attack cartels in Mexico, and
Hmm.
that he was instead convinced like, no sir, that would be bad, that's actually going to war with our neighbor and we
Do this
shouldn't do
other
that,
thing.
so why don't you just like bomb some ships in the Caribbean? It's like, but like, I don't know what fraction of the Navy is down there doing. I mean, it's so absurd. Like, it's so hard to like wrap your head around how stupid all of this is.
Right.
But you can never forget just how stupid things can be in this stuff. But the only thing that was in your piece, and I'd like to maybe like press you on, is that right, you were saying just now, even like he's not delivering on the things he promised. Um, Depends on, like, I mean, I guess he promised not the inflation of the Biden era. Well, that's not working
That's
out. And
not
what's
happening. Yeah.
hilarious is that he's repeating the mistakes of the Biden era, and like, and like Kamala Harris's promises as well of being like, punishing greedy people. So there have been moments like that. But he did promise tariffs, and he's delivering those illegally, and it's having the sort of predicted awful
Yeah.
effects. But the thing that like is lurking in the back of my mind is that like Trump is, I think, pretty successfully destroyed a lot of the sort of mainstream consensus of like what is sound economic policy. And you were saying, like in your piece, like Mamdani doing an end run among the sort of establishment in New York and like really tackling sort of issues of affordability and things like that. I I I'm just not sure we have the kind of like toolkit anymore to on either side. I think Trump certainly destroyed it on the right, but I think the left is not horrified by tariffs such as they are. They're not free traders. They're not like they haven't bought into that they feel that logic is passe, that trade is good and actually makes us wealthier over time. So it's not like the restoration post Trump on the left fills me with a lot of hope for being able to tackle some of these economic catastrophes that he's inflicting on the country. And certainly the Republicans, as you were saying, are going to be in no shape after he dies. There's no one that can like take this thing and unify whatever the hell Frankenstein monster he's cobbled together.
Yeah.
So, like I'm not like terribly optimistic that it's a vibe shift against Trump's failures, but at least a good chunk of Trump's failures are failures that like are the product of policies that he promised. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean,
And
like
so,
I guess that's why it's a vibe shift, right?
yeah,
Like I didn't say that it was a like serious policy shift or like
yeah,
a success for America shift. It's less about the policies and sort of like the graphs that economists are making in their office than about the mood and the feeling. Trump promised tariffs, but what he said about the tariffs was that the tariffs would make things cheaper again and make America more powerful on the economic stage, and people would feel good about it. And like it
return
would make
manufacturing.
Americans,
That was the other
yeah,
part, right? Like,
it
yeah,
would make Americans happy. And like, yeah, I guess he delivered on tariffs in that like he put tariffs in place. But again, I think Americans were not really interested in tariffs as such, but more on the vibe of like, things will get cheap and we'll be happy again and America will be restored. And that didn't come true.
yeah.
Whether he's like given us tariffs or not, that is the part that didn't happen. And when you look at what, Zoran has promised and what Democrats are running on, like it's not necessarily that they're running on like this is a really well-formed economic proposal with like several slide decks behind it and like pages of data. They're running on the feeling of things are not affordable. This feels bad. We're promising to make things more affordable and like show concern for the common person. Like, will they do it or not? Will their policies work? Unclear, but we don't have to figure that out now because they're not the
No,
ones in charge.
I,
And as long
but
as the mood is behind them, then, that is a successful promise. It's kind of, I mean, it's Trump's promise. It's what every politician promises, right? That they will successfully make America feel better and make the economy better and make things like cheaper and nicer for people.
did,
And
did,
the
did
mood has changed from people believing that Trump will do that and feeling like some level of awe and confidence in Trumpian policies, even if you disagree with them, to people on both sides, but especially, I think, on the Republican side, feeling actively disillusioned by Trump. And like that disillusionment never really set in fully, I think, in the first administration because it was so madcap, like just the sheer pace of like, whoa, he's doing another crazy thing. It's kind of impressive that he can be so nuts. Like that continued to happen. At this point, though, I don't know, the news is slower, the pace is slower. We don't have like a pandemic to distract us. The wars aren't new. The
I
dissatisfaction is bubbling up on the Trump side, and I think that's the new vibe that I find interesting.
I mean, I think in the first term he wasn't really president, though, right? Like in the sense that like he didn't know how to get anything done. He always
Also,
had
that, yeah,
he always had adults in the room stopping him and frustrating him,
he was more
and
present than president, and his
right.
presence was very large, and the other people in the room stopped him from like destroying too much.
And then the real shocker is that he like came out roaring and was actually president for the last year basically. And here we have it. These are the wages of Trumpism, real existing Trumpism, as they used to say about the commies, right?
Yeah.
But I want to press you on one thing though. Like I take your point, vibe shift, and it's what politicians do, like make people happy. But I find it like apart from the amazing, like truly amazing spectacle of Mamdani coming to the White House, I love that so much. That was just so good. The part like I think it was a couple of days before, was when Trump like said something aside, like an aside, it was just like, yes, absolutely affordability. And it was, it
Trump
like
said that?
he did it at one point. I mean, I'll dig it up. He was just like, Trump made some noises. It's like, yes, Republicans need to focus on affordability. And what that like somehow like drove home for me though wasn't this sort of thing of like, see, Zoran's onto something, but it was just more like a feeling of like two charlatans are going to be doing the exact same thing from both sides. I know you're probably a little more sympathetic to Mamdani than I am, but it's like, you know what I mean? This is what I was just sort of driving at earlier. I have this feeling that this is, the left is finally figuring out what Bernie would have delivered in 2016 had Hillary allowed him to like actually run against Trump and perhaps win. It's just basically Trumpism from the left.
Yeah.
And we're in for it. Like, and like you may be more sympathetic because I don't know, it'll speak in different tones about the same kind of populist bullshit that this administration's been doing. It won't be saying that Somalis are animals that need to get like deported, and that's important, I guess, to
Yeah,
not be
I
doing
actually think
that.
that's pretty important that
But
he seems like not an actually like morally malignant figure.
well, again, I don't know, whatever.
I mean, we don't know. Who
we don't
knows?
know.
But
I've tried to really not pay that much attention to Mamdani because there's so much like noise about like Israel and Gaza and stuff like that, and I just don't really care. But yeah, I don't know. It just feels to me that like all the sort of optimism around the left, finding its footing around this. I mean, I said it on the podcast with Shadi when we talked to Ross Barkan about this. I'm excited that Democrats are finally having their Trump moment. I think it's time that like both sides, basically have this sort of cathartic fever that like just dislodges this old crusty class of people that are still holding on these barnacles. And I wrote that earlier this year about like Trumpism, like a fire that's going to just like clear the underbrush in the Republican Party, and it's going to be ugly. And here we are. And and like I said, if Trump dies in office, or just can't run, and who's going to pick this up? I don't think it's going to be anyone. It's going to be like a real scramble. And I'm glad to see that Democrats are doing that too. But that said, I'm not at all optimistic about Zoran Mamdani as such. And I just want to press you on that, like your optimism, apart from the fact that he's probably not going to be saying mean shit about Somali immigrants and like throwing people out of the country. Like, are you optimistic about like the rest of it?
About Zoran, like again, I'm dealing in vibes and moods, not necessarily like the policy
How's your
proposals.
mood on Zoran then? Never mind like policy
Yeah,
assessment. Positive mood.
I don't live in New York City anymore, sadly, and I'm not entirely sure that his policies will work. And also, even if his policies did work, like the work of getting them through the New York government will be a challenge. And so many of them will disappear or be muted. That's just what's going to happen, which is fine. That's politics, especially in a huge city with many stakeholders. But I mean, I don't know. One of the things that I have been concerned about, and that continues to be like my major concern for American politics and for the American society at large, is really the feeling, the mood, and the Trumpist mood, the sort of Trumpist mode of existence in American society. Like what Trump as a figure inspires in our country is a sort of a fear, negativity, a lot of cover for creating like dark and racist stories about Somali immigrants. Trump and sort of like the Trumpist movement have really sort of inspired and inflamed kind of the underside of American politics, like conspiracy theories, like anti-Semitism becoming like a thing again in the Republican Party. Um, it has normalized a lot of sort of ugly and negative things. And I think I'm excited about Zoran, not even necessarily as a person. I'm sure he's a really nice guy. I don't know. Um, Actually, I'm not sure he's a really nice guy. He might not be. But he has a positive vision for New York City. And I think is inspiring at least the Democratic Party to think of like, oh, what would a positive vision for America or like American society, like what would that look like? Not saying this is bad and that person is bad and this person is out to get you, and leaning into sort of the fear and nihilism um, of the past decade, but actually being like, hey, I like America. Like, I like New York City. I also like you, the voter. We can build stuff together. We can make changes. We can be like young and excited. That actually feels new and inspirational. I mean, thinking of even just what his campaign looked like in New York City, talking to um, sort of the Gen Zers, especially who went out and knocked on doors for him, a huge number. Many of them were like, yeah, I was inspired because like he seems happy. And also this was a way to create community, to like get out of the house and be with other people. Like it was inspiring in a positive way. And I think the idea and the attractiveness of just like a positive vision coming from anybody, but sure, especially like, a young, cheerful, like person in the new guard, ideally of the Democratic Party, bodes well. Like he as a person, I don't know. I don't know what he's going to be like as mayor, but what he represents is he's giving me Barack Obama vibes, honestly. And like and again, like Barack bombed people too. Like, was he a great president? Like, we can be mixed on that, but you do have to admit that like America under Barack Obama at least felt a little bit more like a place of possibility. People seemed to, and not everybody actually, Republicans were literally in tears because of their black president. But it actually felt like there was a chance of moving forward and like a positive vision of hope and change, even if it wasn't completely delivered on, compared to
So
a vision of American carnage, which is, what we're doing right now. Also,
well,
I want to pause because it says it can't access my video. So
no, you're there, but okay.
sorry, I'm just getting like all these pop-ups. I want to make sure it's working. Is it okay on your side?
Yeah, should be fine. Should be fine.
Okay.
Looks okay.
Yeah.
Look, so a couple of just things to throw in there, which are like my favorite things. I think Obama would have won a third term. I don't think Republicans hated him that much. I don't think all this like the deep, racism. I think it's probably like 25-30% are that hard bitten around it, and those are the Trump, like that's the Trump core base. But like Obama would have easily won a third term, and so that whole argument of like rejecting Obamaism, I think, for me, doesn't fly. I'll just throw that out there.
Oh, sure.
I think the other part that I think is worth pointing out is that I think first term Obama, at the American Interest where I worked before, we ran an essay by Nils Gilman, who will be on the podcast in a couple of weeks, which I thought was really great. And he called it, I think we titled it the Death of Racial Liberalism. And he basically points out that like Obama's first term, the hopey changey stuff, was well in the like mainstream of like the Martin Luther King side of racial progress in the country, which is, properly bringing, Black Americans to the highest level and like really aspiring for a kind of colorblind society. Second term Obama, not because of Obama himself, but because of actually core features of the Democratic Party, became frustrated with that. And it's the sort of the rise of, proper racial identity politics and wokeism that like I think started in the second term and, have been actually an important force in American politics. I think it's important not to I don't know, lose sight of that. And I mean, I guess maybe my query to you there is just like, I think Catherine D, reply to your piece said something like, um, pessimistically said that like, the outcome of like the post-Trump thing on the left would be like woke too. And, I guess, when you're saying something along the lines of all the sort of grotesqueries of Trump, and I share your assessment of like pretty much all of them. I do also at the same time push back at the idea that the woke like idea was itself not bad, just went too far. I think it was pretty bad, and it basically. Had Obama been able to actually be the successful, second term Obama and a third term Obama, if such a thing was possible constitutionally, I imagine he would have fought against that sort of trend. But I mean, I think by the end of the second term, he was kind of basically co-opted into it already. And by the time he was outside of power, he was basically, like playing that game of identity politics much more than he was in his first term. So, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, I guess all this sort of optimism about Mamdani, I'll say, I think he is very Obama-esque in the sense that he is incredibly good at communicating. Like he is like off the charts talented. You can see it immediately. When I saw one of those first videos, I was like, man, yeah, this guy's got it. He's got that. But I do think he's wedded to like all sorts of really fucked up and bad shit in his head that I think is a problem for this country and is like, do you want to like do equivalencies here? Like, is it as bad as Trumpism, as like populist, reactionary, right wing stuff? Certainly feeds into it. And certainly like it's part of like, I'd say a dialectic of one feeding into the other. And it's poison. I think it's poison and that like perpetuates itself. Now I know like the argument here that I imagine you'll give me, and I'll let you make it fully, is like, yeah, but it comes from a good place, whereas Trump comes from like an evil, hateful place, and that's all that matters. I don't think that's all that matters, but like,
yeah,
go on.
Well, so I'm not going to make that argument actually. And I would say that I also never made the argument that the woke overreach was fine actually, and people like got too upset over that. I think there was overreach there, and people reacted to it in a way that, like, frankly, you probably could have expected them to eventually react. And that, I don't know if I would say it's the just desserts of overreach, but it's what you would expect happened. I think that, yeah, second term Obama saw some of that beginning to develop, and then Obama out of power, I think, maybe leaned into that as a way to continue to have power and influence. Not even necessarily bad. I mean, again, don't know the man, that he was like that into it, but it seemed like where power was moving. And so he participated in the trend. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not pro wokeism, and like, I'm not really making any excuses for it. I was interested in Catherine's comment because she suggested that, a woke too would be the response to, Trump. And I actually am not that clear on what that would look like at this point. I actually agree with sort of like the dialectic and the back and forth, like the pendulum swing. But I don't know what it is next, actually, and I would be curious to see it. I think with Zoran, one of the things that, I imagine, though I'm not certain about, is that it has become just very, very clear to both individual, like everyday people, and politicians, people who are trying to gain a constituency, that wokeness and that sort of overreach doesn't work anymore. And any smart politician, and he is or seems to be a very smart politician, is not going to participate in that as much because they know what the risks are. And one of the things that we saw like during the campaign was that when he was confronted about like various statements that he had made, he had supported defund the police, and people were like, do you still want to defund the police? And he's like, nope. Like, just kidding, we're over that now. And like various other sort of like past kind of like peak woke statements that he had made, he was actually like very, very quick to be like, not doing that anymore, actually. Like, I know where the ball's headed. It's fine. We're moving on. So there's an awareness to that. I mean, even with his campaign, he it's cool. He's Zoran. He's young. He's a man of color. His parents were immigrants, et cetera, et cetera. And that was visible when you like look at the guy. But that's also not what he campaigned on. Like he didn't. He explicitly did not have an identity based campaign. Like it was, I'm a guy in New York who wants food to be cheap, which is something that everyone can relate to. So I think actually a lot of lessons have been learned about like what wokeness and these sort of like weird side quests that are unrelatable to most Americans, what they produce politically, which is A, nothing, and B, harsh blowback. And smart politicians are realizing that that's not the game to play right now. Um, and so, yeah, I don't I don't think that he's going to get caught in the same trap. I think also if you look at just Democratic candidates running in midterms right now, the message seems to be like going out basically to focus on affordability and focus on the feelings of the other party. Like, please stop talking about trans people. Please stop talking about any of these woke topics. Nobody wants them. I mean, even like the most intense Democrats at this point are trying to cool down at least about those specific angles. So some learning has begun.
I think the job is pretty easy for Democrats to do exactly what you said, which is just point to the failures because they're manifest and going to be getting more and more manifest. That's the easy part. Talking about affordability is cheap and easy as well. The part that always struck me about, say, like the abundance agenda, which to me seems also like insanely overspecified and not underspecified, and also like kind of dodges some of the harder questions. Is like when do questions of equality come up against questions of actually generating abundance? Which wins out, and depends on how hard your commitment to equality ends up being and how you define these questions is where like woke 2 ends up coming from, I think. Because I think while right now Democrats are able to quiet down these constituencies that have strong beliefs about how one talks about equality and things in this country, and good on them. I guess, and maybe I'm maybe reading too much into what Kat is thinking, but like my sense is that those commitments are still there, and you're gonna have to like basically do what the same thing that Trump is unwilling to do with Nick Fuentes, for example, which is to basically you have to disown that sort of stuff and really marginalize it.
Wait, which stuff specifically?
Like commitments to a certain kind of, again, identity-based concepts of equality is what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Rather than I guess what seem like quaint and maybe outmoded senses of prosperity. Like the thing that's so fascinating about the whole hullabaloo about the abundance stuff is that actually I'll put a link to it. I think it was in the Dispatch. Friend Nick Claremont wrote a good essay about he went to the Abundance Agenda conference, and he points out that these are a bunch of libertarians and other folks that have been talking about this stuff for a long time, and now like the Ezra cohort has like glommed itself onto it somehow. It's kind of funny and cute, but like there's a real tension there, like in actual core values and priors, which will be interesting to see it play out, I think, at some point.
Yeah,
I
mean, I got to tell you, and I feel I like being in Washington D.C. and like knowing and being around some of these people, I kind of feel like an abundance sniper is going to come for me at any moment, but I don't really believe in the abundance agenda.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think it is sort of like libertarianism dressed up as progressivism. And like if you look at like many of the abundance policies, it's like, well, like this is a policy that will help upper middle class liberals who live in cities feel more abundance.
Right.
Not sure like how much it's going to help other people, actually. It's kind of targeting a pretty small segment that happens to have a lot of money and constituency. And so it's getting a lot of airtime. Like, I don't know that the abundance agenda is really going to like reach the coal miners that, Trump was reaching with his affordability manufacturing stuff. Yeah, if I think about what woke 2 might be, or maybe it's not woke too, but what the next big concern will be. I do think that there is just like a growing and increasingly visceral feeling and understanding of just how much inequality is shaping the lives of Americans, especially younger Americans, and like a real sense of like lack of power and lack of control over the economy, like an inability to participate. And I think that frustration will have to be dealt with. Like I can see concerns about like the 1%, the rich getting richer, sort of like the walled off wealthy, um, you know, tech people who are, replacing us with AI. Like I do think that that may be the next big concern. And I don't really know who's going to take that up, in part because those constituencies that are being criticized, and who are turning off my lights as we speak. See, I told you
Yeah.
the abundant snipers were coming. I'm screwed.
No, it's not.
um,
This is specifically the opposite of the abundance agenda. If the abundance was, it'd be like abundance of electricity. You could just like keep all your lights on all the time, right?
yeah, well, I didn't say that they were going to give me abundance. I said they were going to try and get rid of me. This is just
Right.
paranoia at this
You know,
point.
the
Um,
only thing it's like it's even how you phrased it there though, right? It's like is it inequality or is it like lack of opportunity? And I mean that's still I think like ends up being the main, like I guess left right split. What I mean of an old right that existed at some point that like Trump has completely destroyed at this point. Um and so for me it's this question of um whether again sort of like equalism like takes hold. I think maybe that's basically maybe woke too is just economic populism on the left. But I kind of think that the lessons of this stuff being unpopular still has not like fully marginalized the kind of like interest groups that have built themselves up in the Democratic Party on this kind of politics. I don't
oh
know. I
yeah,
think
for
it's going to be
sure.
difficult. It's going to be difficult to like properly exercise that. Um,
I mean, to clean out a party system is like by nature difficult. That's kind of why they exist, right?
yeah, yeah,
To prevent that sort of turnover. For
yeah,
sure, there are people who've staked their careers and livelihoods and whatever on wokeness, and they will want to continue to have those careers and livelihoods. But I still think that, like, when you're thinking about reaching voters or campaigns, smart people are going to realize that, like, concerns about inequality, or affordability are interesting to a much wider group of voters.
yeah.
And if, inequality becomes woke 2.0, that is actually a question I think that animates a vast majority of Americans. So I don't even think that it will be something that you can kind of stigmatize or push to the side as like a fringe movement. I think that's like the core concern of most Americans who don't see themselves as being in the top 1% or even the top 5%. Like, I think the constituency that you'll have to deal with, and then this, again, like it sort of looks like what kind of hardship, what kind of fight do you want to have? Like, if you want to focus on affordability and inequality, that will probably mean alienating the wealthy, or like an ownership class in your party, the people who pay you and donate. But then like maybe exciting a whole mass of sort of like middle class Americans. And it'll be interesting to actually see how parties balance that, like what
Yeah,
that looks like.
you've spooked me now, and maybe that's a good note to end on this because it like just thinking through this, it feels to me like you're right that there's just no constituents anymore to talk about uh, to juxtapose opportunity to inequality, and that's sort of like the old Republican business class thing, and they've just been shredded, and I don't think
I
they're
think it
not.
I think it'll be
Yeah.
Silicon Valley, actually.
Hmm.
That's
That
the
be able
that's
to
kind of
make that
the
case for opportunity.
I think that is where you're seeing a lot of that conversation happen in uh slightly different phrasing and words, but it's a sort of like equality of opportunity, and smart people who know how to use tech and know how to invent things win.
Yeah,
People
right.
who get to live in like Mark Andreessen's like good reality are the smart ones who worked hard, and
Right.
the rest of you.
But that's Ayn Randism, and that's not like winning politics. You know what I mean? Like
No, well, I mean,
there's
that's
a
what I mean. I think those are the people who will be standing up for that kind of politics. I don't
right.
think it will
So that
necessarily be
means
popular.
that basically we're heading for some sort of disgusting communism, basically, because for me, arguments from like basically addressing inequality by extirpating the ownership class, as you put it, is a recipe for that kind of stuff. And if it's economic woke, coupled with, I still think there'll be an identity woke to it as well. So you'll get like a kind of infighting about this and the kind of, again, alienation of like certain groups. But maybe like economics will be the dominant thing. Again, not very optimistic about it. But like I said, that's not a bad note to end on. Pessimism at the beginning and end.
Classic Demir.
Classic. Thanks, Christine. Great talking to
Yeah,
you.
well, welcome back.
Thanks.